Good evening, darling. Oh, you look so great. I can see everything. Your color is wonderful. Your face is bright. You got a little bit of sun,
Yes, I
a
did.
little
Yeah.
bit of rouge.
Mm-hmm.
Can't
Yeah.
go
Well,
out in the sun because of the chemo.
yeah.
Um,
My makeup crew hit me before the lights came on. So yeah.
they did great. And
Mm.
I've got my coffee mug, my favorite. Sorry, I can't. Mercury is retrograde. Even if it's not, I tell everybody that. Sorry, no, can't do it. Mercury, you know. Um, I'm really looking forward to tonight's show and welcome everyone. Bill just told me how many people we've got that we're sitting waiting for
Mm.
the show to start. I'm so grateful. That's wonderful. I love it when people show up early. Um, and tonight's show means a lot to me. And I know that it means a lot to you as well. So for those that did not read the description in the link, we'll start us off. Did I already say classes in session?
I don't think so.
Okay, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody get your notebooks out, pay attention, tune in, tune up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tonight's title of our episode is Faith Comes a Callin'. Kind of like how they talk down here in Georgia. Drop that G every chance you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The calling is not something one asks for or has an expectation of as we grow and mature. There are pastors, priests, and ministers among us who never stand upon an altar or hold a microphone. No stage is necessary. They pass among people with grace and ease, shedding a certain light, resonating a high vibration that spreads across the terrain they walk, all that surrounds them. They leave a mark on the heart of mortal souls they encounter in passing, and those folks wonder what changed in the air, what shift suddenly occurred. It's a magical and mysterious impact made, invisible and palpable in equal measure. Tonight, we will explore the concept of holiness and the calling as spiritual ascension. Consider it an upgrade in soul school. So we're hopping from one grade to the next tonight.
Yeah.
And the reason that I wanted to talk about it is not just because of our personal conversations about this, about feeling called to do a certain job in the world. But and I've talked about this a lot in 2020, when people started dying from COVID. I was getting phone calls, a lot of phone calls,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized sometimes in the middle of the night, it's okay. You could do that literally at any moment. In fact, your dog could trigger my dogs. I don't know where my dogs are. Oh, there's one there. There's
Okay.
another one there. I got
There's,
them both.
there's always someone coming and going, and my
Well,
faithful guard dog is ready to pounce. So.
well, these two, I mean, look, they're just as cute as they could be. Oh, my precious babies. Um, apparently I bore them because they had a tendency lately to sleep through the show. And that's okay. Should they want to,
Mm-hmm.
either they're taking it in subconsciously or they can always ask me to hit the archive link.
Yeah. Right.
So which they never do. So I can only assume that they're absorbing the frequency and they're good and they're, resting comfortably. Okay, so I had felt it since college. I had felt it. I had heard it and I had felt it. After college, I got very involved with the Church of Religious Science, which was the only religion that I had ever come across that made any sense to me. The science of mind. You know very well about Ernest Holmes and that philosophy
Yes.
/ religion. And when I was right on the verge of becoming a minister in religious science, I had an incident with the minister, and he told me unless I was giving a certain amount of money to the church every month, that he did not think that I was ready to ascend to that position and be assigned my own church, that I needed to be financially investing in the church. At which I stood up and said, he's a guard dog.
Yeah, give me 1 second, okay?
Okay.
I'm listening, but I'm just going to make sure everything's okay.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead. Tend to the puppy. So anyway, okay, so I'll just talk to the rest of you, which I was anyway. And then suddenly I had this realization of, I mean, Jesus Christ, is it all about money? Is it all about money? Is that what it's all about? And for me, it wasn't. I do what I do for free, everywhere, anywhere, with whomever. My calling with the galactic family. It's not that they come when I call, they are already here, but they make their presence known to those who are in my presence, which I am so grateful for. And I think that's just really so cool that that happens. And it does with enormous regularity. I don't think that I have ever done it that people didn't see things they had never seen before, and had feelings they had never felt before, and made contact in a way that they had probably always wanted to, but couldn't for whatever reason. And so I do a lot of third eye opening. I do a lot of meditation. We do the bowls. And to me, that's all part of the calling. For me, that's all part of that sound that I heard in the back of my head that said there was something I was supposed to do, and I avoided it, ignored it, didn't listen for years and decades. And then I realized that the job that I did when I worked at Harmony Hill, I was ministering to these children. And the job that I did when I had my restaurant, and 200 people a day would come through, and I would go from table to table and sit with them and minister to them and let them tell me about how their day was going, and give them sage advice from somebody who was at the time in my 20s and 30s, and just did it automatically, just spontaneously. An outpouring of love. And when it was the restaurant, it was the outpouring of the food and the love. And when it was the school, it was the outpouring of the hugs that those children needed and the love. And it's the love. It's always the love. I say over and over, I did not come to teach you. I came to love you. Love will teach you. Love is the answer to every question. It is the rudimentary core of all else. And then I felt satisfied, because once I wrote the books and I entered the lecture circuit and was invited to all these different events and was meeting thousands and thousands of people and making these connections, I was being a minister that way too. I was doing my job. I really felt like I finally understood that I was doing my job, and I didn't need a license. I didn't need a piece of paper. I didn't need, you go through 4 years of college to get a philosophy degree. It's like going to a seminary for 4 years. You can't get a philosophy degree without studying every religion on the planet, period. They're all totally intertwined. So when I started getting the middle of the night phone calls from dear friends who had lost someone that they loved to the center of their being, to a vile virus called COVID, I realized that of all the people in their lives that they could reach out to in that moment of complete despair and utter crisis, they chose me. If they had my phone number, they reached out to me that way. If they didn't, they found their way to Lenny, who put me in touch with them. It was a real wake-up call for me. No pun intended. It really was the calling. And so I got in touch with Chip Coffey, and I asked him what he was affiliated with, because I knew he was a minister. I knew John Tenney was a minister. And we mostly use it to marry people or to renew vows. That's my understanding from both of them, that, that's its primary purpose in their lives, to bring people together in love. But that they also are pastors in passing sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's an energy, it's a force. It's almost beyond words. And I know that you feel the same way, because you've actually done what I've managed to avoid for decades of my life, which is getting behind a pulpit or, up at an altar or, whatever it is, and speaking into a microphone and tending to the flock, and everybody's encased in a building and the message comes forth. And so you and I were talking about this calling that we both felt. You were kind of born into it. I'm not saying you didn't have a choice. Maybe you didn't, but you at least were able to feel it enough to fulfill what you perceived as your obligation as a young man. And then you turned and walked away from it. And I walked away from the Catholic Church when I was 15. Actually, I didn't walk away. I was going to CCD classes to make my confirmation, and I got thrown out because I was asking too many provocative questions.
Yeah.
And so, and my mother said, to our family, if you want to know God, if you want to feel the deepest part of your own faith, go to the woods. Just go out into nature, and you will see God everywhere.
Yeah.
And she was right. And, so I guess in a way, if I affiliated myself with anything at all, because of my own ethnic heritage, I felt drawn to the Celtic tradition, my Scottish ancestry. And so I studied a lot about that. I studied about witchcraft and the manipulation of energy and tapping into source and, so on and so forth. I studied a lot of stuff. I read a bajillion pages over decades and decades of my life. And it was a virus that brought what was in me to the surface. So talk about your calling. What brought you to where you began? What brings you to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I was raised in Christianity, evangelical Christianity in particular. My mic, we didn't get a chance to check my mic ahead of time, so I'm wanting to make sure I'm coming through clearly tonight.
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. I grew up in an evangelical Christian home. I wouldn't necessarily call it fundamentalist, because that brings to mind thoughts that my childhood doesn't really bring to my mind. But some might clock it as being that. But it was a traditional evangelical Christian home, and my father was a pastor. So I did grow up around the ministry. I did grow up in that setting where you were almost, in a way, like the first family, of your own little, your little congregation, 300-400 people, whatever it was. And I loved it. I had a wonderful childhood. A lot of people have very bad, traumatic experiences with the church. Thankfully, mine was not that. Okay, there's my dog again.
She is background music.
It is okay. She's got quite a bark though. But hey, hush, sweetheart. Lucy.
Well,
she'll hush eventually.
Yeah.
So I think she's not used to me being down here when I do this. She's used to me being in another room. So she's hearing me and getting excited. But I grew up around that and I loved it. And it was a great environment. And my experiences were all positive. My father as a role model, I could not have asked for a better role model than what I had in my father as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a minister, above board in every possible way you could imagine. And, you hear so many horror stories about preachers and pastors and people who grew up in the church and how they saw their parents actually being different people behind the scenes. My parents were more holy behind the scenes than you would peg them as being, and I don't mean that they were like super straight laced and uptight. I mean, they were real people, down to earth, the best people you would ever want. I mean, give you the shirt off their back and then sew you another one. I mean, if you had a need, they would meet it. I mean, just the best of the best. So I had a very positive experience with that, but that isn't really what sold me just in itself on becoming a pastor myself. I had a very intense series of spiritual experiences when I was a teenager that really transformed my life. All growing up, as we talked about last week a little bit, my family experienced the supernatural in an extremely active home, extremely supernaturally active home that we grew up in. So the supernatural, the paranormal was pretty normal for me. I grew up with it as being as normal as anything else, as roast beef on Sundays and, pizza on Fridays. It was pretty normal. It's never really normal, but I know you of all people know what I'm talking about.
Like, you get used to it.
You do. You kind of get used to it. And you get used to it in the same way you get used to a migraine. It's always there, but like you can kind of adapt to it. So it was always there. And I knew this was real. I knew there was more to reality than what I could just touch physically, but sometimes I could also touch physically that realm. And but when I was a teenager, I really became just obsessed with the notion of the divine, with the notion of God, and I went after it with every fiber of my being. And unfortunately, there's a lot of predatory people out there ready to pounce on the passion of a young person, and they might not even understand themselves as being predatory, but their doctrines are. And they're there to sort of vampirically harness the passion of youth and sort of use it to power their ministry machines, And there was a lot of people out there waiting for the passion of someone like me, who's very intense. I mean, Andrea, for a season of my life, and I'm talking when I was in high school, I was fasting every other day, total fast, water only, every other day of my life, thinking that was somehow bringing me closer to God. I'm not saying there isn't spiritual benefit to that, because I think that there is, as well as physical benefit, but I was doing it for reasons that were not so great, thinking that somehow I was earning the favor of God, getting God's attention. I mean, I prayed 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours in concert when I was in high school. I would be going to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning and getting up at like 7 to get ready to go out the door. I would just be pacing the floors, praying and crying out to God just all night long, because I wanted to really touch whatever this was. I knew there was more. I knew there was more to reality than what you could experience with your 5 senses, even though you could experience that more with those 5 senses. I knew there was more, and I went after it with every fiber of my being, and I wasn't going to quit until I got it, or it got me somehow, and I don't think any of those things are the reasons why I had the experiences that I had. I think the only reason we experience spirit is grace, and grace alone. The only thing we bring to the table is brokenness. The only thing we're really able to contribute is our failures. It's not anything we're doing that earns us any of this. So I'm not saying my actions and going after it were any kind of currency that I exchanged for any kind of calling or anything like that. It's just that I think I burned myself out, really. And then I came to the point where you're almost forced to rest because you can't do anymore. Right. And I had a series of intense spiritual experiences and just a very deep sense of calling. And I knew that I was supposed to preach, that I was supposed to teach, that this is what I was supposed to be, and that this is what I was supposed to do. And I pursued it. My wife and I got married 2 weeks after I turned 19, and very young, very, very experienced, knew exactly what I was doing and getting into, of course. And we immediately moved to Florida, where I began attending Bible college, as they call it, and was there for years, moved back, became a pastor, and I served as a pastor for about 12 years. And I did it passionately, did it with my whole heart. I loved every second of it. But kind of like you, well, my mind just doesn't know when to stop. You know, I'm a searcher. I'm a pilgrim. You know, I'm always moving forward, right? And so like those nights where I would spend 4, 5, 6 hours praying, trying to go after God in whatever way I knew how to, I couldn't stop. You know, even when I was a pastor and I wanted to know and I wanted to ask the questions that you weren't supposed to ask. I wanted to poke holes in the things you were told were too holy to poke holes in. I wanted to tug at those theological threads and see if the sweater came apart, you know, and so I did. And there was a lot of things that were sacrosanct that you just don't question these things, that I found myself questioning, that I found myself no longer able to believe the way that I once believed them. And some of these things were pillars that my faith was integral to, or that were integral to my faith, rather. And when some of them fell, the whole thing kind of fell with it. Like,
it crumbles all at once.
And
one pillar, and everything starts to shift and then crumble.
Yep.
And all the work that you did to purify yourself, to surrender yourself, seems lost in the rubble.
Yeah. And you can be doing really great at Jenga, but it's that one block you pull out that sends the whole tower down, right? And there were a couple of those I can remember. I can remember very carefully pulling out that block, being like, okay, this will be just like the others. The tower will remain in place. I'll be able to keep doing what I'm doing, but this one, no, it didn't quite work that way. And with the pulling out of this block, the whole edifice, the whole structure fell down. And I found my faith kind of crumbling at one point. And when I look back at it now, I realize it was not crumbling. It's all one process. You know, it's all the same thing. But at the time, it felt like it was crumbling. It was just part of the cycle of what it is to be alive. But at the time, it felt like it was falling apart on me. And, long story short, there came a point in my life where I didn't feel like I could continue serving in the capacity that I was serving in, for a couple different reasons. Number one, the organization I was a part of, my beliefs were too different from theirs. And I just didn't feel like I could operate in that with my integrity intact, because I can't lie. I'm not that kind of a person. I can't even lie by not speaking. You know, I just didn't believe the same way. Yeah. So I had to make that break. And at the same time, I just felt there were some things I needed to get in order myself in here before I could properly minister the way that I had been. And so I stepped away from it for a season. There's other reasons too. Of course, there always are. But, I stepped away from it for a season, and I've spent the better part of a decade not functioning in that capacity. Now, in that time, I've written books, I've traveled, I've actually probably spoken more from the time I stepped down as a pastor up until now as I did in the 12 years that I was a pastor, because I've traveled all throughout the world preaching and teaching and doing what I do, with a little bit of respite because of COVID, and lately because I've purposely taken a break from it. So I've never really stopped ministering in that sense of the word, but the pastoral kind of sense, yeah, definitely. And I, for a season, I kind of moved away from it and stepped away. And it's interesting because, like you said, I was kind of born nested in that. And it was real to me. I had my own experience of it, but still, it was still something that it was just all I ever knew in one sense. And I had to lose it to be able to find it again. Mm-hmm. Whereas your experience was a little bit different, and I think it's the difference between, in philosophy, the universal and the particular, right? The universal is, the difference between universal and particular is like, book. So if you say book, like book as a concept, well, that's a concept, a book. It's writings bound together somehow. Some books were in the Library of Alexandria that no living eyes have ever seen. Others, are trashy dime store, romance novels. I mean, but all of those fall under the rubric of, or the heading of book, right? Book as a category is the universal, but the particular is The Kingdom of God is Within You by Tolstoy. The particular is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. The particular is, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Yep. Being in Nothingness by Sartre. It's like that's the particular. The universal is the concept of book, but then you narrow it down to to the particular by naming it. Well, but if you don't understand universal, it's hard to conceptualize particular. And if you don't understand particular, it's hard to conceptualize universal. So you really got to have both of those. And so, like, I grew up in the universal sense of ministry, where ministry was everything. The call of God, that was everything. It was all around me. And I discovered it for myself, yes, but then I had to lose it and let go of it and then find it. Or I apologize, I said that incorrectly. I grew up in the particular, right? It was a very particular thing for me. To minister, to be called, to be a pastor was this very particular thing. It was to preach and teach. It was to stand behind a pulpit. It was to minister in this way, whatever, in this tradition. So I grew up in the particular. And then I embraced that particular myself. And then I lost it, and it dissolved into the universal. And over the last decade, I've learned ministry. I've learned how to function in my calling in the world without a pulpit, right? I've learned how to function in my calling by doing the job I do that is secular, but by being who I am as a person in that context. So my coworkers, a lot of them still call me Pastor Jeff, even though I don't go around like preaching it. That's the last, I'm not known that way, but I'm known as, if there's something going on, I'm the person people come to. It's just, I am Pastor Jeff. It's kind of a joke between a few of us, but it went from the particular to the universal, and yours was kind of in a more universal sense. And then it came to the particular, into where it was, you were always doing it in some way, whether it was at a restaurant, whether it was in counseling or whatever, you were always ministering somehow. But then through the pandemic, it came to a head and manifested in the particular of becoming an ordained minister. And so it was like, mine was more the particular into the universal. Yours was more the universal into the particular.
And that's interesting too, because I was ordained in a non-denominational, multi-faceted collective.
Yeah.
Where everyone is welcome, and it's the Universal Life Church.
Yeah, right. Even the name itself,
25,000 ministers all over the world.
Yeah,
that are a part of this collective.
Yeah,
and nobody's doing exactly the same thing. Some have their own little churches, or some have big churches, or some have the internet. We all of us do our own thing.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, right? And that's the beauty of the whole thing. That's the beauty of the calling.
Yes.
I think, like, this is, so to me, like I said, it had a very, cut me off if you ever want. I can just talk. So
go. No, I just thought you kept talking in particular Universal and Universal Life Church is where I ended up settling, which is, it's like, it's everything all wrapped up into one thing. It's just like a certain energy. It's like the universal energy.
Yeah.
That if energy is everything, and everything is energy, then and consciousness, then it all gets globbed together.
Yeah.
And it really is, it can be either a recipe for disaster or a recipe for success.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to reach other people, and being able to impart a message of hope and healing and love and light in a way that I didn't do it for a very, very long time, because I'm so very well aware of my own flaws and the mistakes that I have made in life, that I don't believe there's anybody on this planet that doesn't have some regret about something.
Yeah.
I always looked at myself and said, I should have just been smarter than that. How did I get sucked into that? How did that relationship fall apart? What part did I play? And I felt unworthy.
Yeah.
As if there was some kind of divine perfection that is associated with someone who wears the collar, who wears the, and I remember when I was a kid in high school, and my guidance counselor asked me what I wanted to do. I was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. And I said, I want to be a priest. And he said, you can't, you're a girl. And I said, well, then I want to be an airline pilot. You can't, you're a girl. And I went home and I told my parents how many times he told me what I couldn't do with my life. And the next morning they were in his office. And the next afternoon, I had a new guidance counselor, a woman.
Nice.
Who believed that I could do anything that I wanted to do. Yeah. He wasn't a bad man.
Sure.
He was not a bad man. He was a kind, good man. But his, he had blinders on, and his limited peripheral vision of what a child can become. Never tell them no. No matter, whether they want to be an EMT or they want to be an astronaut. Yep. Never tell them no.
Right.
Tell them they can do anything that they want if they set their minds to it. And, when you just get kicked down and torn down and made to feel like you're less than,
yep,
some part of you, it becomes, as you were saying, integral to who you are. And it imbues you with a self-doubt that might take a long time to dispel.
Yeah.
And what I came to realize was that my flaws and my foibles and my humanity and my experiences all wrapped up in this ball of energy was what made me able to do what I do now.
Yeah.
Because I realized that those flaws and frailties and failures were what made me into who I am today.
That's right.
So I can empathize with others who are going through the same thing, because the human condition is, pretty much the same thing for all of us.
Yep.
And it's just filled with trials and tribulations and challenges and problems to overcome. And so I went from feeling unworthy to feeling worthy.
Yeah.
Because I knew during COVID that I was doing something to help people who were bereft in the absolute depths of despair.
Yeah.
And I know that you helped a lot of people who lost their loved ones. How many funerals you conducted, how many births, you welcomed babies into the world, and, this whole cyclical life and death, going out the front gate of the Garden of Eden, coming all the way around and coming in that back gate. I feel like that's what's going on with you, and I know it's what happened to me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you know what? As you were saying, that sense of self-doubt that we have, that maybe there's even a sense of calling, but then there's this resistance to it internally, like, well, yeah, but what you are, what you've done, one of the things for me, even in reapproaching this, was the sense of, how can you preach to someone when you yourself have watched your faith crumble? Right. Because your job is to try to give them stability, and so there was this sense of self-doubt that was rooted in that, or of like, well, how can I ever be certain that it's not going to fall apart on me again? Because I was so certain the first time that I had it right. How can I be certain, let's say the second time around, that it's not going to fall apart on me again? And so there was this kind of nagging and niggling sense of self-doubt there as well, of just like, you can't really be certain. It might all fall apart on you again. You might think you're totally right now and you've reconstructed and you're ready to go, but you don't know. And there was that doubt that just was there, and it was there, and it was there. And I had this crazy experience years ago where I felt to get up and write this essay. And it was kind of this weird idea. It wasn't weird, but I had never really seen anyone or read anything quite like it. And I felt to write it, and I just was tired, and I didn't, and I kind of consciously pressed pause on it and was like, I'll do it in the morning, right? And I woke up sometime later and just opened up Instagram, which is not a great habit to do right when you wake up, but I did. And as I opened it up, a post came up from a friend of mine who's a theologian in Europe, a female theologian, and it was a post. She literally wrote, I mean, almost not word for word, but very darn close to exactly what I felt to write before bed. And she wrote it and posted it around the time that I would have posted the same thing. And I was like, it was like the collective was trying to communicate this thought in that moment. It was like God was trying to get this thought across. And my shoulder was tapped. I pressed snooze, quite literally on that and went back to bed, but it still came through someone else. And there was a same book right here, Emerson's essay sitting by the side of my bed. And I literally felt opened a page, and I have it marked. I don't remember the page number, but in the moment it was a page number, open to this page number, and it was self-reliance, right? And I open up self-reliance, and my eyes just fall right on the words that go something like, basically, if you don't trust your own genius, your own sense of intuition, you'll be forced to take your own advice for the rest of your life through the medium of someone else, And that was exactly what I experienced in that moment. And that really shook me and woke me up. And it was like, you have plenty left to say, man. There's so much left in you that you've not given. Open your mouth and speak, but it was this self-doubt that crippled me. And I told the story last week of my friend who, this prophetic individual, this prophetic shamanic individual who called me up and literally told me, boom, 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 essentially word for word, like a literal physical paranormal experience that I had with my daughter in an active hotel room that correlated to all the things happening in my life down to exact words. But the vision this friend of mine saw was he saw me kind of crumpled in self-doubt, like doubting myself. And then he said, I see what looks like he's like, I think this is like your guardian angel walking toward you. And he's like, it has like a candle or a lantern. And he's like, I can see how it sees you. And as it's approaching you, it's getting like you're getting his thoughts about you. It's your mind is opening and you're beginning to see things. Are we okay, Bill?
Yes. I don't want to interrupt you because I'm listening to everything you're saying. And I'm just going to throw this out to you. If you ever want to do something on Sunday and send a message in that way, like your pastoral ways of the past, you let me know and we'll make that happen.
Okay.
Magic in the air.
Because exactly what he just said, to put that out there, it's emboldened. It's something that it's inside of him. And anyone that you can help, like you both are doing with what you do on Soul School, to send that positive message, a learning message, educational, spiritual, to make someone feel more whole. I'm all for it because we need more of that. Instead of all this negativity that we're surrounded by, we need more positive messaging. You think about that, and I'm out of here.
Okay. All right.
Well, that's an offer that we can hold him to because he did it live on the air.
Okay. Yeah. I'm interested. I'll definitely pray on that one. I probably won't have to pray very long on it, but But he had this sense of this being walking towards me, and as he was walking towards me, he said what was in his mind about me, the way that this thing saw me. I was starting to get it as well. And that's when he said the words that came across on the device my daughter and I used in our little investigation, where he was like, and I feel like this is going to be a return. He said, he's like a return or a moving forward by returning. And he was like, now you're surrounded by all of these people calling you pastor. But part of that, even the visual he got, was the reawakening of my own personal calling had to do with also me being in kind of self-doubt, but then there being this transference of how the divine saw me that really kind of picked me back up on my feet. And I think that's not just a personal thing. So many of us, there are the call of the divine on our lives. It's not just for the special guy or the special gal. It's like, everyone is called to something. Everyone has a unique thing that only you can do, literally. And I know we think we're all essentially the same. And if I don't do it, somebody else will. Maybe, but not quite the way you could have done it.
Right.
It's kind of like that article thing. It's like, sure, that friend of mine basically wrote the same thing, but it's still a different flavor. And what if we had both written it, and there were two takes on the same thought out there that could have like danced together and built off of one another and create, it's yeah, maybe to an extent someone can, but not exactly. You are shaped in such a way that the wind of spirit passes through you and makes a certain sound through you that can only be made through you because of the way life has shaped and twisted you. That's just the way it works. And so everyone has that. And your calling might seem small to you, but it is not, because this is like, Indra's, net, or that web, right? Where every drop of water reflects every other drop of water in the web. And so every little drop is every other drop in and of itself. It's like every life is every other life. Every person is an entire universe. So the way you touch your world is the way that the world is touched. So everyone has this calling, but we're all plagued with these kinds of self-doubts. And as you said, regrets and, I screwed up this relationship. I screwed up there. I made this mistake. I made that blunder. Whatever. It's like, those are the things that we think disqualify us are actually the things that qualify us to do what we do. And I was thinking about this all day, and then I'll shut up and let you talk, because I feel like you've got something to say. But like, I was thinking about the biblical story of Jonah, right? Which is a great story. It's really a comedy of errors.
Yes, it is.
It's meant to be read. It is literally meant to be read that way. So we have this character, this prophet Jonah, who's called by God to proclaim a message to the Ninevites, enemies of Israel, and there's historic reasons for that. They weren't fans of each other, okay? And God taps Jonah on the shoulder and says, unless they turn to me in this way or that, I'll destroy them in this certain amount of time. So go and tell them to turn from their ways, and I'll relent. And Jonah doesn't want to, because Jonah doesn't want them to turn and be spared. He wants them to fry because he doesn't like them. And so he tucks tail and he runs and he goes in the opposite direction. So his calling as an Israelite was to go and proclaim a message to non-Israelites, which itself is taboo in that culture. So he avoids it. He goes in the opposite direction. He gets on a ship to Tarshish, and that's where he's fleeing from this calling. Well, while he's on the ship, a storm kicks up and is threatening to destroy the boat. And so the non-Israelite crew members are like, hey, somebody on here is, in a bad way with the gods, because, who is it? And Jonah's like, oh, it's me. I'm the guy, throw me overboard. And basically what ends up happening is the crew members who were like, who's the guy who's, done something to offend the gods that has caused the storm? The crew members end up getting converted as a result of seeing what happened as a result of Jonah's turning away. So that's meant to be read comedically, to say that even in his fleeing from his calling, he's fulfilling his calling. So the thing that should be his disqualifier, the fact that he's running away, actually ended up having the opposite effect. They end up throwing him into the ocean as he requests, and he's swallowed by a great fish, it says. And he's 3 days in this great fish. And it's debatable whether this fish is meant to be understood as some kind of like, sort of like a monster almost that takes him into the underworld, or whether it's to be understood as an actual creature. But one way or another, we're basically given the idea that he dies in the belly of this fish, because it says elsewhere that he was in Sheol, which is the Jewish conception of the afterlife. And then after 3 days, this thing spits him out, presumably dead, on the shores of Nineveh, where he's supposed to preach. And he ends up preaching to them. They're converted, and everything goes the way God says it's supposed to go originally. There's more to the story, but I won't go into it. But the thing that swallowed him, this great fish that he ends up dying inside of, that should be the ultimate disqualifier. You die in the belly of this beast. Well, the belly of that beast actually is the very thing that qualified him to be the messenger he was trying not to be, because the main religion of the Ninevites was that of the worship of Dagon, which was a half fish, half humanoid figure. And so to see this figure vomited out on your shore by this great fish, who then is resurrected and speaks to you, to them was a sign that this was a messenger from the gods. So the very thing that should have been a disqualifier was the very thing that qualified him. In every case, his running from the calling is what qualified him. His being swallowed by this thing in the interim and being digested in its belly was the thing that qualified him. And so it's like our mistakes, our failures, and the resulting consequences the things we think make us unworthy to be what we feel inside we're supposed to be, they're actually the things that qualify us and empower us. They're the things that give our message grit and fire to it, because there's reality backing it up, you know? And if Jonah had just been a guy who heard a calling, got on a ship and went to Nineveh, wouldn't have had the same impact as if he was vomited up on their shores by a great fish when they are worshipers of a great fish, you know? So he had to run. He had to encounter the obstacles in order for his message to be what it was supposed to be, and in order for him to be the messenger he was supposed to be. So the things we think we disqualify us qualify us. The things that we think count us out are what count us in.
Keep talking for one more moment, honey,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I can text my sister and tell her
Yeah.
that her cat is throwing a fit to get out.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, even in the context of Christ, you know, in the Christ story, death, right? That should be the ultimate disqualifier. But in the story of what Christ is supposed to have accomplished, he's supposed to have accomplished the destruction of death. But in order to defeat death so that life is victorious, one has to die. One who can't die has to die, descend into death, and then illuminate death from the inside. So it's like death should be the ultimate disqualifier. Crucifixion should be the ultimate disqualifier. But crucifixion is what is the ultimate hope, at least in the Christian religion. The crucifix was like the ultimate sign of shame. It was like the ultimate sign Rome held up as like, you are, if this is what we do to those who stand against us.
Of the worst.
Absolutely. It's where the word excruciating comes from.
Yeah.
You know, it means from the cross. Excruciate, you know, this ultimate symbol of shame, and it was transmuted into this symbol of hope. So what should be the ultimate disqualifier, being nailed to a Roman cross, the ultimate symbol of shame, at least in the Christian tradition, becomes the ultimate symbol of hope. So again, the things we think disqualify us, qualify us. The things we think count us out, count us in. The things we think take our message from us are our message.
Yeah. You know, I had a phone call a couple of weeks ago from a lovely man named Jacob, who contacted me because he wanted to buy my books, and we ended up talking at length. And he's a religious man, certainly, and he very devoted to his Christian faith. And he asked some very important questions, which led me to believe that, you know, he was doubting his faith. And he asked me if, with everything that our family went through at the farm and everything that's happened in my life subsequently, being touched by spirit again and again and again, you know, that door that once it's opened, it never closes, as you well know. And if there was ever a time that I doubted my faith, and I immediately said, no, never. I mean, it came through me spontaneously. You know, I didn't even have to think about it. No, never. You know, did I doubt? Because, you know, for me, the natural is the supernatural. It is all intertwined. And, you know, living at the farm for 10 years was the ultimate experience of soul school. No, it really was. I mean, from kindergarten to grad school, all smashed into 10 years. And I've had this interesting, we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to touch on this for a moment. But I feel like dealing with what anybody in their right mind would consider a health crisis. My faith has deepened. My healing is, you know, I surrender. I do. I surrender to my faith. It has, you know, faith comes a calling in mysterious ways. And for me, what took me to that other, it really is an ascension for me.
Yeah.
I feel, I mean, like I posted a thing, we didn't get to, I was going to play a little bit of Pope Leo's address to America that he did last Saturday, because the words were so meaningful. Anybody that wants to read it, it's on my Facebook page with this whole long explanation about how I don't identify as Roman Catholic, but I love this man and I love his message. And, you know, I'm tired of seeing people trash him, which they don't even know his history. They don't know his background. They don't know where he comes from, what he's accomplished in his life, that he adopted Tiberius, Pope Francis's dog, that, you know, and now they're inseparable. You know, I mean, they don't know, but I can look into his eyes. I can listen to his words and feel the depth of his faith. And it is so akin to my own that there's something sacred about him. Truly a holy man, a kind, generous, warm, loving spirit of a man who was elected. I'm sure he was the last one walking into the conclave to think, I could be the next pope. I'm sure he was struggling on who am I going to vote for. You know, I mean, he was, and they chose him that fast. I couldn't believe it when the white smoke came out. I was like, no way. You know, not with all the turmoil that the world is in and all the politics in the church. And no way were they going to choose somebody that fast. I thought, oh, somebody's going to lose their job. They put the wrong brick in the stove. And, you know, and I relate to him. I relate to his gentle spirit. I relate to the fact that he walks in grace, that his first words to humanity as Pope were, peace be with you all. You know, the messages are all the same. What you say in a pulpit, what I say on a stage or in a group of people, it's all the same message. Love is the answer to every question. Do unto others as though you are the others.
Yes.
Now, it's very, very simple, but sometimes you can be that person that someone else hears that message through for the first time.
Yep.
Where it resonates, where the vibration is exactly there, where you attach the natural and the supernatural in this cosmic swirling dance, this graceful, beautiful dance where all are one. And it is that realization of oneness that as we pass that on to our viewers, our listeners, our students. Yeah, oh yeah, Bill got a rap. Ugh. Go stub your toe again. Blamed me for stubbing his toe before I even came on. I love that man so bad. Okay, so anyway, all right, so we'll just pick up where we left off, and I would like to talk about Pope Leo and the hope for, you know, maybe being the antidote to the toxic waste dump known as the world right now. You know, we'll talk about that in another episode in another class.
Yes, we will.
We will, and I love you all with all my heart. You know, Jeff and I say class dismissed with our message every week. Be the light you seek. Good night, darlings.
Yes.